When we think about the colonization of India, the image that usually pops into our heads is the British Empire, right? The Queen, the soldiers, the whole grand state-run machine. But here's the thing, that's not how it started. The initial conquest, the takeover of an entire subcontinent, wasn't done by a country. It was a hostile takeover, carried out by a single, publicly traded, for-profit company. And that's the central question we're diving into. How on earth could a tiny startup with just 125 initial investors and about £72,000 in seed money manage to bring one of the wealthiest empires on the planet to its knees? I mean, it sounds completely impossible, but it happened. So let's break down exactly how they pulled it off. To really get this, you have to see the starting line. In the 1600s, Mughal India was an absolute powerhouse. It was responsible for a quarter of all manufacturing in the entire world. Its economy, in today's money, would be worth a staggering $21 trillion. And on the other side, you've got the East India Company. Not a nation, remember, just a business. A tiny startup, a complete David to India's Goliath. Okay, so first things first, we have to get our heads around the fact that this whole thing started as a business venture. This wasn't some state-led invasion flying a national flag. This was all about profit. It was about the bottom line, not patriotism. It all kicks off in 1599. A handful of English merchants are just fed up. The Dutch had a total stranglehold on the spice trade, and spices back then were like oil today. They called pepper black gold for a reason. So they pull their cash, get a royal charter from Queen Elizabeth I, and set sail. Funnily enough, India wasn't even their first choice. They were aiming for the Spice Islands, but they got pushed out by the competition and ended up making landfall in Surat, India in 1608. Now this is where it gets absolutely insane. That royal charter, it wasn't just some business license. It literally gave the company the powers of a government. Think about it. They could mint their own money, raise a private army, wage war, write their own laws. To put that into perspective, imagine if a company today was given the right to operate in another country and do all of that. It's unthinkable. But that's the kind of power the East India Company had from the very beginning. For the first 100 years or so, the company pretty much stuck to trading. But a huge shift was on the horizon. The company was about to pivot from being just a business into a full-blown military and political force. And their big opportunity came when the mighty Mughal Empire started to crack from the inside. After a powerful emperor, Aurangzeb, died in 1707, the empire began to weaken and splinter. Local governors, these nawabs, started acting like their own kings. And all of this division created chaos. And in that chaos, the company saw its chance. This right here is the perfect example of their new strategy. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 was the moment they seized control of Bengal, one of India's richest regions. But it wasn't really won on the battlefield. It was won like a corporate takeover. Seriously. They found a disgruntled executive, the army commander, Mir Jafar, and offered him the CEO job. They lined up a powerful banker to finance a whole hostile deal, and then they used bribery and conspiracy to win. It was a boardroom coup, just with cannons. And this was the truly diabolical part of their strategy. They figured out that ruling directly is messy and expensive. Why deal with all the headaches of administration? Instead, they just install a puppet ruler, like Mir Jafar, and pull the strings from behind the curtain. The puppet gets the title, but the company gets to control all the money and the resources. Genius, in a terrifying way. So once the company had political power, its business model completely changed. It wasn't about trade anymore. It was about pure systematic extraction. This era is known for good reason as the Great Indian Loot. And I'm not being dramatic with that title. Get this, the actual word loot that we use all the time in English, it comes from the Hindi word loot. And it entered the English language at this exact time, brought back by the very company officials who were stripping India of its wealth. After another major victory in 1764, the company basically forced the Mughal emperor to give them the Diwani, which is the right to collect all the taxes in the incredibly wealthy regions of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. At that point, the mask was completely off. The company wasn't a trading partner anymore, it was the taxman. And what's the very first thing they did with this newfound power? Well, they didn't build hospitals or roads. Nope. They immediately tripled the tax rate on everybody. The result was an absolute catastrophe. This brutal taxation, plus the fact the company was hoarding grain to jack up prices, led straight to the Great Bengal Famine of 1770. Up to 10 million people starved to death, while the company's profits went through the roof. It was so brutal, they would even go to survivors and collect the taxes owed by their dead neighbors. The sheer amount of wealth that was drained out of India is, well, it's a number that's almost too big to comprehend. The economist Utsa Patnaik calculated that the total amount siphoned off by the company and later the British government comes to about $45 trillion in today's money. Just to put that in perspective, the entire GDP of Great Britain today is about $3 trillion. And here's how they managed it. It was this perfect closed loop of exploitation. Step 1, you collect crippling taxes from Indian weavers and farmers. Step 2, you use that exact same money to buy the textiles and goods that those people just made. Step 3, you ship those goods to London and sell them for a massive profit. So for decades, pretty much everything the company took out of India, they essentially got for free. Now, obviously, a corporate state built on this kind of brutality couldn't last forever. But the way it ended, and the legacy it left behind, is just as telling as its rise to power. The company basically became a victim of its own greed. The corruption was so out of control that it became a huge scandal back in London. And then, a massive rebellion across India in 1857 made it clear the situation was totally unstable. So the British government decided the company was now a liability. In 1858, they effectively nationalized it. The company was dissolved, and all of its land, its armies, its entire operation was transferred directly to the British Crown. The corporate raider was out, and the official empire was in. But the ghost of that corporate rule is still around. You can see it in little things. For example, in many parts of India today, the head of a government district is still called the collector. That title is a direct fossil from the company's time, a reminder that the main job of an official wasn't to govern, but to collect revenue. And that stolen wealth, all those trillions, it didn't just make a few people rich, it financed Britain's global ambitions. As one source puts it pretty bluntly, the money that funded Britain's role in World War I and World War II was extracted from India. That really changes how you look at those conflicts, doesn't it? So just think about this incredible arc. In 1757, a private, for-profit company starts its hostile takeover of a global superpower. And then, in one of the greatest ironies you will ever hear, in 2005, the leftover, dormant brand of the East India Company was bought by an Indian businessman. The company that once owned India is now owned by an Indian. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty chilling thought. The story of the East India Company isn't just some dusty old history lesson. It's a case study in what happens when corporate power is completely unleashed from any kind of moral or governmental control. And it really forces us to ask ourselves, what's to stop something like that from happening again?